but confirmed. We're about to start our picks for the first week of NCAA football, which is it's here. It's upon us.
Finally.
Finally. It's the most exciting time of the year, college football. So we're going to go through all the week one picks. John Scott's going to go into detail. Kind of going to give him a game. He's going to give us the ins and outs, and then we'll both give you who we think, because I feel like we're pretty qualified to say who's going to win. And then, so without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with South Carolina versus the North Carolina Tar Heels. Your classic SEC, ACC matchup. John Scott, give us some details about this game.
Well, first, UNC South Carolina, they played a lot in the past, and most recently they played a lot as well. But hopefully it's a game that they keep playing. I know they keep putting it back on the schedule, hopefully with a Florida State, Miami game or a Georgia-Florida, something they play a little bit earlier in the year that will eventually have huge implications. But looking at these two teams, South Carolina comes in a very great team, a solid defense. Unfortunately, they have a really hard schedule coming out of the SEC. This is a team that I think the end of their schedule could be, an 8, 9, 10-win team, but unfortunately with who they have to go through, that might not be the case. So this game for them against UNC is a very, very important game.
Big momentum game.
Big momentum game, and they need this win because without this win, their season could go south really fast. Absolutely. And then on the other side with UNC, you have a new coach. Basically, a lot of excitement. They've sold out their season tickets completely for the year.
But in basketball?
No, in football.
Oh, wow.
Completely sold out. But they're really, really excited about the year. But I don't think now is the year. I think it's going to be a few years before UNC's ready. So I think South Carolina takes this game, but it might be a little bit different in the future.
I'm right there with you. I think South Carolina takes this easily. Honestly, I don't think this is going to be too close of a game. They're bringing back a lot of production. North Carolina, not your traditional powerhouse football team. Not saying that South Carolina is, but in the battle of this Carolina game, I think South definitely takes it up. And it's hard to go against SEC week one. It's hard to.
Well, debatable.
But that brings us into our next game. We've got Ole Miss against Memphis. Yeah, we've got Ole Miss coming off all those sanctions, losing a lot of production. Can you go in more detail about that?
Hard to go against SEC in week one. In this game, I'm going to go against SEC
in
week one. I'm real big on Memphis this year. I think they win the American over UCF. They have a lot returning. They had a very, very powerful offense last year, one of the best in the country. And they're returning 9 defensive starters of a defense that wasn't that bad last year. So really they're bringing a lot back. Over 80% production returning from the year before.
That's insane.
Which is really, really good. Teams that return 80% or higher usually increase their win total. So for Memphis, that would be 10-win season. Yeah. So on the other side of the ball, you're looking at Ole Miss, who is probably the back end, the lower end of the SEC. And they were 5-17 last year. They didn't have the best defense last year. That is actually being nice to them. They had a very bad defense last year. But they had a really explosive offense with DK Metcalf and the quarterback, and all those guys are gone. So they're losing their quarterback and their top 3 receivers. So they're definitely going to take a hit on offense, which kind of held them to that 5-7 last year. So I think they're going to be worse this year than they were last year. So I think this is perfect at Memphis. I think Memphis comes in and steals a win from Ole Miss.
It's at Memphis.
It's at Memphis.
At Memphis. Well, would you say that Memphis takes Ole Miss is all but confirmed?
For sure.
There you go. Well, I had Ole Miss circled with this to begin with, but then John Scott went in all these details, and honestly, I switched up. I think Memphis is going to take this game as well. I think Memphis is going to be a force to be reckoned with. They're going to take UCF's self-proclaimed national championship away from them this year. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep.
All right, so next game up is a neutral site game. Big game for week one. We got Auburn against Oregon. Gus Malzahn, a great neutral site week one coach. Auburn might be a little shaky right now. Oregon is a projected top 10 team. What you got here, John Scott?
Well, I have Oregon coming in number 7. I think they're going to be a lot better team than they were last year. Last year, they're kind of putting pieces together, and they lost a lot of really close games. If you look at Oregon, they lost a lot of games at the very end. They blew some games. They were up by 10. I think if things were to change to be a little bit different here, they're a 10-win team last year. So they're a very good team with an experienced quarterback in Justin Herbert coming back, who's ready to prove something.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the ball, you have Auburn, which has SEC talent, SEC recruiting, a great run game, but you have the question mark at QB with 2 young guys, either Joey Gatewood or Bo Nix.
And then Gus Malzahn saying week 1 he's going to rotate those
Right.
quarterbacks.
So both quarterbacks are going to play week 1, which kind of scares me. If you're playing a small school, no name, kind of get ready. We're supposed to beat them by 50, play both quarterbacks, whatever. But you have a neutral site game with Oregon, who's a top 10 program, which I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see. I think they're going to choose one and stay with them both, but they say they're not. But really, this game comes down to, can Auburn run the football? And Oregon over the years has really built up defensive line wise, recruited well defensive line, become more physical. Got number 1 defensive end in the country, Kayvon Thibodeau, coming in. So we'll have to see, can Oregon stop the run? And if I think they can, I think they're going to win the game.
Now this is the first time they've played since the national championship with Cam Newton, and that fantastic last minute drive. He had to run it in at the end to get the time off the clock.
Yep.
So you think Oregon kind of has a chip on their shoulder too, trying to
Yeah,
prove
most
something.
definitely, and it's definitely going to be different for Oregon considering they're not facing Cam Newton.
Absolutely,
The quarterback spot's unknown. So.
Arguably best quarterback in college football history.
But it's also really interesting. These were the two kind of the birthplaces of the new style of offense. You have Oregon with the fast-paced offense, and then Auburn with the fast-paced offense as well.
Right.
Two different variations of the offense, but now they're finally
Oregon
playing
tends
each other.
to throw it a little more. Auburn, when they run between the tackles, even at that fast pace, tend to have better production. I've got Auburn in this.
Really? Yeah, I mean, Auburn could easily win this game. It's kind of a toss-up. I'm leaning Oregon because of the quarterback.
Yeah.
It's
also, a sure thing.
There's just question marks like Gus Malzahn's taking over the play calling again for the first time in a while. There's just a lot of unknown with Auburn. But they're still a very talented, a very good team, so it could go either way.
You think if Oregon loses this game, do you think they have any opportunity to still make the college football playoffs?
No, I think this game, probably out of all the games, is probably the most important game that we'll play because both Auburn needs this win. Basically, Auburn probably needs this win to be bowl eligible, and it's huge for Malzahn. But Oregon's schedule is weaker down the back end, so if Oregon loses this game, I think they'll be left out of the playoffs even if they go undefeated for the rest of the year. So for both programs, it's a really big game that they both need to win.
Starting off a neutral site, I got Auburn, you got Oregon. All right, let's move into our next game. We've got Pitt against Virginia. So we got the Cavaliers going against the Panthers. I for one have Virginia, top 25 team on my list. John Scott, what you got?
I have Virginia ranked 17th. I actually have them winning the ACC Coastal. Not because Virginia is the best team in the world, but I think the ACC Coastal is kind of a lot of average that has a lot of teams that have a chance of winning. A lot of programs kind of coming back. So I have Virginia actually winning the Coastal Division. They are a good team, bringing back a good offense, good quarterback, and good system in Bronco Mendenhall. But also they're playing Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is kind of retooling themselves and rebranding themselves. Not only did they rebrand their jerseys and their logos, but they fired their offensive coordinator. They brought in a new spread system, and it's going to look a little different from the kind of the power Narduzzi run game to more of a spread. And I don't think they necessarily fit that at the moment. So I think this is a win for Virginia. Secondly, last year Pittsburgh actually won the game. It was raining sideways, and I think Virginia might have a chip on their shoulder. Getting a win that they think they should have won last year.
Absolutely. We'll cue the inner Sandman, right? So that brings us to our next game. And we really don't even have to talk about this next one. I mean, it's Bama against Duke. I mean, that one is confirmed. There's no all but.
Yeah, unfortunately for Duke, the best thing that was at Duke just got drafted 6 overall to the Giants. Duke,
and then a wide receiver, too. They lost a big shot wide receiver, didn't they?
Yep, he's gone. He left a year or two ago. But Duke's been a great program. They've won, 8 games here or there. They've a lot better than what Duke, and they've really grown. But they're facing Alabama. This is Alabama's going to beat them pretty bad. The question for this is not if they're going to win, how much are they going to win by?
The spread is the question with this. I mean, Alabama coming off a national championship loss. No media, really. Not as much as last year in comparison for the Bama team.
Yeah. This is real big for Alabama, basically to see what Alabama looks like for the future, not necessarily the Duke versus Alabama game.
Getting everyone back in gear, ready for the grind of the SEC West and the SEC in general. Yep. So our next game, we've got Notre Dame against Louisville. Louisville, still kind of getting back into shape after the Lamar Jackson era. Right, they're still a little in shambles, and we got Notre Dame coming off a college football playoff visit. Got shut out though, right? Got shut out against Clemson. So what we're going to see here?
Well, unfortunately, Notre Dame was a very good team last year, and unfortunately, they ran into a Clemson. So when they lost, everybody's like, "Oh, Notre Dame isn't supposed to be there." Well, yeah, they were supposed to be there. Unfortunately, nobody was going to beat Clemson.
Nah.
I think Notre Dame's going to be a very good team again. They lost their top returning rusher, and they have a few question marks on defense, but they're still together. They're going to be a pretty solid team. I have them at number 10 coming into the season. But Louisville has a ton of question marks. And then week 1 game, new coach, new everything basically. Everything's changing for Louisville. And for me, there's just too many question marks. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think Notre Dame's going to handle them pretty easily.
I'm right there with you, John Scott. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. No reason to go into any more details than, it's just the traditional powerhouse Notre Dame against a, in shamble Louisville. So that brings us to our next one, which is the Bulldogs, Georgia, against Vanderbilt. A little week 1 SEC action. How we kind of just talked about Bama Duke kind of correlates to this game too. We're going to see Georgia come out of the locker room, knocking the dust off, back into who Georgia is. They're going to score 5-6 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think the big thing for this is the same with the Alabama-Duke game. We want to see what Georgia looks like coming out of the gate. One big thing to look at for Georgia is they're replacing their entire receiving core. So how is Jake Fromm going to work with these receivers? And yes, it is an SEC game, but they're replacing a lot of production at the receiver position. So I think there's going to be some emphasis for them. So that's really should be the focus of that game.
Absolutely. So I've got Georgia in that one. You've got Georgia in that one. That's pretty, I don't think anyone in the country other than the head football coach for Vanderbilt has Vanderbilt winning that game.
I would be thoroughly surprised.
So
I would be thoroughly surprised if Georgia doesn't win by 14 or more.
Absolutely. And that, another blowout's right behind that. We got Clemson, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech going away from from their traditional offense of running the power option, and now they're going into more of a spread. Do you think that could, change some things?
Yeah, well, I think this might be the biggest blowout of week 1.
Oh, wow. You think Clemson
biggest Power 5 blowout aside from the FCS schools. I think Clemson's going to be better than they were last year. They're just bringing so much talent back. Offensively, they're losing basically no one. Yeah. And then Georgia Tech, not only are they switching from the triple option to a spread with the new coach, but they're also returning less than 50% of their production from the year before.
That's hard. That's rough.
When you combine those two things and you throw in, hey, you played Clemson week 1, that's going to be a really, really bad game. I think Georgia Tech's going to have a hard year. It's going to be something new for Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's actually consistently been a good team.
They've been in the top 25 past couple of years.
Yeah.
Consistently in there. So, my heart hurts for them going away from the triple option. I know there's a lot of Georgia Tech fans that are happy about that. So I've seen on social media and stuff, but I think Clemson might hang up 70 if Georgia Tech's not holding on to the football.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough year for Georgia Tech. They start with Clemson and then with Georgia.
Start hard and hard.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah. So that brings us to BYU Utah. John Scott, I think you've got a different pick than the majority of the country here. So let me know who you got here.
Well, I actually have Utah. I think I made a typo in our preseason stuff. I have Utah winning their division in the Pac-12. But this is always a great game for me to watch early in the year. It's an early game, rivalry, and I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think since it's starting off and the rivalry is so hot. But I think Utah's running game is really going to be able to win this game. And Utah has a great defense coming back as well. Yeah. But I really think this is the year that Utah might make the next step and win the Pac-12.
That'd be phenomenal for that program. Yeah. So that brings us to UCLA, Cincinnati. I've got Cincinnati in this game. I think they're returning a good amount of production. I think they're going to be a solid contender. They went to a decent bowl game last year. Came up a little short. I think I'm right about that. Came up a little short, a little chip on their shoulder. Had a nice off season, so I think Cincy's going to be able to take UCLA pretty handedly. But
really, well, last year they played, and I think it was a 24-17 game, very close, and really the run game from Cincinnati kind of beat UCLA, and also UCLA had a true freshman quarterback playing, who really couldn't get anything going with Cincinnati's defense. I think it's going to be another close game. I haven't marked who I think is going to win this game because I keep going back and forth. I'd probably lean towards Cincinnati because of experience. Right, I think absolutely. UCLA still has some time, and they still are going to get gassed run-wise. But I really think this is a toss-up game, but I think I'm going to go with Cincinnati as well.
Cincinnati on that one. I know my former boss, Timmy Hines, would be happy about that. Timmy, shout out to you. But now we come into a game that could be a little closer than what people may like, in my opinion. For Oklahoma, we got Oklahoma, Houston. Oklahoma, who's coming off another fantastic year, and another Heisman quarterback, first round draft pick, losing him, so they're having to replace him on offense against Houston, who puts up a lot of points. They score a lot. So and if there's a weak point on Oklahoma, it would be traditionally their defense. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that they've improved in the offseason?
Well, they have a new defensive coordinator, so we'll just have to see. It's going to be interesting to see what Houston is, because obviously Houston fired their head coach after an 8-win season.
Right.
Their offensive coordinator left for Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
But they still have a lot of talent on their roster.
Absolutely.
And they've always been able to score. And they took in the head coach from West Virginia, which was everybody was surprised that he went.
Absolutely.
So
he's crazy.
Right.
Yeah, he's crazy.
Houston, who knows? I mean, we don't know what we're going to expect from Houston, but I will tell you this: they'll be able to score, especially if Oklahoma's defense looks the way it looked last year.
Absolutely.
One thing that worries me about Oklahoma, even though I have them ranked 5, is with Jalen Hurts, we have to see that he can throw the ball down the field in Oklahoma's offense. And I know Oklahoma's going to tweak their offense to him, but Oklahoma could have lost a lot of games last year if they didn't put up 45, 50 points.
Absolutely.
So if they're not able to put up 45, 50 points this year, I think they might take some losses that people aren't expecting. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Oklahoma still wins by 21, but I think Houston will be able to score.
I think if they leave him in the game, Houston keeps scoring. Yeah, I mean, Jalen's always been good about putting up points at Bama. I'm excited to see him in this little different offense at Oklahoma. So we'll see how that happens. But that brings us to our next game. We've got Florida State starting off with Boise State. That's going to be a really interesting game to start week 1. Florida State coming back from a shaky last couple years, getting a really new system now implemented with that coach from last year, was being his first year. So he's got a whole off season now to work with them after a first year, and now he's coming in, hopefully getting in his strides against a really powerful Boise State team who's known to be a giant killer.
Yep.
Yeah, so John Scott, take us into a little more detail about this week 1 opener.
Well, I'm an FSU fan, so I'm actually really worried about Boise State. They play really well in week 1 games, citing Georgia, a couple other week 1 games. So
Troy last year.
Troy, yep. Florida State had a really, really bad year, worst year in a long, long time. But I think Florida State's going to be a lot better. You have the offense coordinator from Houston who knows his offense and knows how to implement it instead of us trying to run an offense like that. So I think that'll make a big difference. On defense, they're switching from a 4-3 to back to a 3-4, which makes more sense with the players on the roster at Florida State. So Florida State had a really hard schedule last year, much easier schedule this year, and I think they had a lot of young players play last year. So people didn't realize how many young players were on the field for Florida State last year.
Right.
So I think this will be a much more experienced and a better football team.
Yeah, as a fan of college football, it's one of those things when Florida State's good, college football just is better. Yep. So for the sake of college football, I picked Florida State in this game. I think they're going to handle Boise State. I think it's going to be close. Could come down to a field goal. However, I think they're going to have what it takes in the end to pull out.
I have FSU going 8-4, 9-3. Just the way the schedule works out, I think that's a safe area to say. I think we're going to have a much better year. But it starts here with Boise State. We'll know a lot more about Florida State after the Boise State game.
We'll see how it plays out.
I think it's a game that's going to be a close game early on, but I think Florida State's talent will pull away and maybe a long run by Cam Akers or something that creates separation.
Yeah. Well, good deal. Though that brings us to some more Florida teams playing at the University of Florida and Miami week 1 rivalry game. Love to see
them both of them lose.
Yeah. Love to see such an intense game week 1. Yep. And Florida's got a lot riding on this game. They've got a tough schedule this year. They're projected a top 10 team, with all the other rest of the SEC powerhouses. However, they're playing Miami, who take us through some of that history that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, so they recently, the last time they played, Miami won 24-17. Miami was actually unranked when Florida was ranked, I think, 11 at the time. So this is a rivalry game. They don't like each other. It's a Florida game. It's going to be a close game. I think I have Florida ranked number 8. I still think that's a little high. The reason why I have Florida ranked 8 is because I don't really think there's teams behind them that are very good that can jump them at 8. That's why they're up at 8. I think Florida has a lot more question marks than what people think, and I think they're taking that 10-2 team from last year and the coach and saying they're going to be good. Yeah. But people don't realize Florida lost a lot of production from the year before they were around the place, especially losing 4 out of their 5 starters on the offensive line.
Yeah,
and they're known to run the football. So we'll see.
See how it plays out.
Yeah. But the big thing about this game, the difference is going to be, you have Miami with a new freshman quarterback playing against Florida's elite corners, which will be a big question mark. And then Florida's known to run the football, but they're missing 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, and Miami has a great defensive line. So because of that, I think it's really going to be really close. But I think Florida's run game, in a week 1 game, run game's important. I think the run game will give them the win.
With that experienced quarterback.
Yeah. I'm not very high on the quarterback. I think he's okay. But
I don't think he's anything to write home about.
Right. But he does have that week 1 experience. He'll be able to play. So I think they're going to pull away. I think Florida wins by maybe 10 or 7, but nothing outrageous.
I've got Florida pick for me too. But with the rivalry game, you just never know. Anything can happen. So that brings us to our next game. We've got Northwestern against Stanford. That's ST Stan, not Sam. Stanford. I think this is probably one of the biggest toss-ups of Week 1. Sometimes I feel like Northwestern has a little edge. Then I'm like, well, Stanford, they might have a little edge. So I'm kind of conflicted. John Scott, can you help me with my confliction?
I'm conflicted as well. I actually haven't picked this. I keep going back and forth. If you listen to any of the national broadcast or any type of online pick, everybody's picking Stanford. But I think a lot of people are picking Stanford because it's kind of the name's a little bit bigger and they've been good in the past.
Absolutely.
But they're losing Bryce Love. They're losing their top receiver, and they weren't even the best team last year. They had a lot of issues. But Stanford's got a pretty. I mean, they have Notre Dame, USC, Oregon. They're going to play UCF. So Stanford's schedule. It's not
easy.
Yeah, so they're going to have a tough season. But first game you have Northwestern. They went to the Big Ten championship game and obviously lost. Good team, great defense, returning a lot of stars on defense. But the big X factor for Northwestern is 5-star quarterback from Clemson has now transferred to Northwestern because he was not going to play, obviously. Because of the quarterback situation at Clemson. So he's now at Northwestern. So we'll see if he makes a difference. I mean, 5-star player going in there. So I actually think I'm leaning Northwestern. I really do. They played really well in Week 1 games. But I could be eating my words later because Stanford's an established program.
It's an established program. So that's what makes it so hard to pick against them.
Right.
But, I think I'm leaning more towards Stanford right now. That might change in a week. Might change the day of. But I'm going to lock in nowhere near confirmed.
No.
But Stanford. Stanford for me right now.
That's going to be a great game.
Yeah, fun game to watch.
Hard-fought
game. So we'll see how that plays out. Which brings us to our next game. We're getting close to the end here. We still got a couple games left, but we got South Florida against Wisconsin. Now I think this Wisconsin team has been flirting with top 10 talent the past couple years. They've been flirting with it, haven't really gotten to there. They've slipped up / had a hard schedule, but a good Week 1 starter for them against South Florida. I think Wisconsin really just rolls it out there, knocks off the dust, takes this easily. John Scott, anything that I'm missing?
Yeah, well, Wisconsin's their quarterback transferred to Florida State. A little weird how that worked out. He was the starter. He transferred. Something was going on there. Their backup started the last few games, so everybody thought he was taking over. I have Wisconsin ranked number 18. They got a great run game. They've always had a great run game. Returning their running back, who's probably could be in the Heisman race, top 5 running back. And because of that, they're going to beat South Florida just talent gap wise and running the football. Right. But I don't know if Wisconsin is going to be as good as what they've been in the past. But they will definitely beat South Florida this year.
I think they've been so close to just breaking that ceiling, and they just can't get through. So hopefully for that program they find something that works out. But I think they're going to be a top 25 team, just not a top 10 team.
Right, and really they need a passing game to be a top 10.
And that's just not how their offense is structured right now. But so then we come to another rivalry game, Week 1, Colorado State, Colorado. If you look online, I don't think this is going to shape up to a close game. Colorado is the favorite by far.
Right. Colorado has won this game multiple times over the past. This game is one of our games that we put on here because it's a rivalry game. It's a Week 1 game. It's always a fun first game to watch because the games are just starting. But yes, I think Colorado takes this with these.
I don't think there's really anything on Colorado State that's going to stop that charge. But
and not only was Colorado State not the best team last year, but they're returning like 43% of production.
And that's just always rough.
That's not going to help.
Yeah. So then we've got hopefully a more competitive game. Oklahoma State, Oregon State, the Battle of the States. I think Oklahoma too much Cowboy for that game. But the Beavers do have a decent amount of production returning. John Scott, you might know those numbers, but it's Oklahoma State. They're a traditional run and gun team that puts up points and has enough stops on defense.
Yeah. I'm really high on Oklahoma State. I have them actually ranked 22 coming in, which you probably won't see Oklahoma State ranked very high on other rankings. But I'm very high on them basically because their schedule. They have a really favorable schedule. They have a lot of games at home, and it's just not really a tough schedule. So I think I could easily see them sitting at an 8-4 team. Oregon State is probably one of the worst Power 5 teams over the last 4 years. Yeah. They're really in a transition. This game's on here because it's 2 Power 5 teams week 1, but I think Oklahoma State's going to beat them pretty bad.
Too much Cowboy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and then the last game on our picks this week is a really interesting game. It's a cool game because it's James Madison against West Virginia. The first time James Madison, not the first time that they're playing an FCS team, but they're coming out. They're starting off week 1 against West Virginia. Our old head football coach from Troy, Neil Brown, leading that charge. He's got a lot of transition on offense. West Virginia has a lot to prove. I mean, they were preseason ranked last year very high and kind of fell off there towards the end. Their coach left. Early December, went to Houston. Then they stole Neil Brown from Troy, which, in my opinion, was a fantastic hire. I mean, granted, I'm biased, but Neil Brown, fantastic head coach. We'll see how this turns out for them in the future. But week 1, John Scott, who do you think is pulling away with this?
Well, first off, Neil Brown is a great coach, and the future of West Virginia is in good hands. But with that being said, Will Grier, starting quarterback for West Virginia, obviously left the NFL last year. Yeah. So they have a lot of question marks, especially offensively. And people forget, when Neil Brown came into Troy, first season did not go well.
It was a losing season.
Yeah, it was very bad. And he turned them around. Now, granted, there was a lot more turning around to do at Troy than I think there is at West Virginia.
Absolutely. A little bit of a talent gap.
But Troy doesn't play Oklahoma. Troy doesn't play Texas. Right, yeah. So I think it's going to be a tough first season for West Virginia. I think they have a lot of question marks. Now, JMU's coming in as a top-ranked team in the FCS. People don't realize. A great program who actually is applying to be at the FBS level.
That's what I was hitting at earlier.
Yeah, UConn just dropped out of the FBS, so JMU wants that spot. So what's a better way to get that spot? Come out and win week 1.
Dukes.
So the Dukes are returning a ton of production. They're going to be a very good team, great coaching staff. They're ready to go versus a West Virginia team that's still learning their way, a new quarterback, a new system. Could be a little shaky. So I'm actually going to pick JMU. I think this might be that one FCS upset of week 1 that people need to be looking out for.
Yeah, that could happen. I think Neil Brown's too good of a coach to still lose to a JMU who's still trying to prove themselves. I mean, West Virginia.
Well, game day's been the JMU, and they beat Division I teams back to back.
And you're right. It's, I mean, there was just a West Virginia that I think there's just too much there. It's just a little bit different style of play when you look at FCS, FBS. So I think even with the shakiness, the figuring it out, Neil Brown's a lot different coach than he was 4 years ago when he was starting at Troy with that losing season. So I think he'll. I don't think it'll be pretty. I don't. I think JMU will score a little too much for the faithful Mountaineer fans. I think they'll be like, "Ooh, that was." We held our breath for a little bit, but I think West Virginia pulls this out.
Well, I could easily see that. The one thing with him is, he's a different coach than he is now, but the main reason why Troy didn't win the first year is because talent recruits production. Absolutely. And then playing his style of football. So how quickly can he implement that at West Virginia?
Right. And I'm not sure how different those two styles were, what he adopted.
They're actually very similar.
And that's what I was about to get to. I'm fairly certain they're similar. So we'll see how it all plays out. But that concludes our week 1 picks. We went through them all. We're going to be posting graphics of who I have and against who John Scott has. So make sure to check us out there and send us your own picks, and we'll talk about those some too. And with that being said, I think that's it.
That's it.
There you go.